The room fell silent the moment my husband looked at me. For 4 years, he had only known my voice. I had been the one leading him through hospital corridors, reading every document he signed, holding his hand through sleepless nights, and praying that one day he would see again. That day finally came. The doctors removed the bandages. He blinked. He smiled. Then his smile slowly disappeared. He looked at me for a long moment before saying something that made everyone in the room freeze. I felt my heart shatter, but I refused to let a single tear fall. Some people thought my marriage had ended in that moment. They had no idea. That was only the beginning, and by the time they realized who I really was, it was already too late. Before we continue with today's story, let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to sacrifice everything for them, only to realize they never truly saw your worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with unforgettable twists and powerful life lessons, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Let's begin. When people first met me, they usually forgot my face before they forgot my name. I wasn't the woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. I didn't wear expensive designer clothes. I didn't spend hours chasing beauty trends or trying to impress strangers. I preferred simple dresses, comfortable shoes, and my natural curls tied neatly behind my head. People called me ordinary. I never argued with them, because I had learned something a long time ago. The world pays attention to people who shine on the outside, but life has a way of revealing the people whose light comes from within. My name is Ava Brooks. At 32 years old, I was living a life very few people understood. To everyone around me, I was just another administrative assistant working at Sterling Financial Group, one of the largest investment consulting firms in the city. Every weekday, I arrived before 8 in the morning carrying the same worn leather handbag. I greeted the security guards by name. I made coffee for meetings. I organized files, I answered emails. Nobody looked at me twice. That was exactly how I wanted it. Because the truth was, I wasn't an assistant. I was the owner. Not just a shareholder, not a silent investor, the owner. My late grandfather had built Sterling Financial Group from a tiny accounting office into a multi-million-dollar company. Before he died, he left the company entirely in my hands. People expected me to become the glamorous face of the business. Instead, I hired experienced executives to run the company while I quietly worked among the employees. I wanted to know who people really were when they believed nobody important was watching. Money has a strange way of changing people's behavior. So does power. Pretending to be ordinary had taught me more about human nature than any business school ever could. Some employees treated cleaners with more respect than executives. Others only smiled at people they believed could promote them. I noticed everything, and I never forgot. Only 3 people knew my true identity: my attorney, the chairwoman of the board, and my personal assistant, Mrs. Eleanor Grant. Everyone else believed the owner lived overseas. That rumor worked perfectly. Then, I met Marcus Bennett. He wasn't rich when we first met. He wasn't famous either. He was simply one of the brightest financial analysts our company had ever hired. Marcus worked harder than anyone else. He stayed late. He arrived early. He treated interns with respect. Whenever someone forgot their lunch, Marcus quietly paid for it. When the office janitor's son needed surgery, Marcus organized a fundraiser without telling anyone he had donated the largest amount himself. Watching him from a distance, I admired him, not because he was handsome, although he certainly was, tall, confident, a warm smile that made people feel safe. No, I admired the man I believed he was. One rainy Tuesday evening, the elevators stopped working after a power outage. Most employees had already gone home. Marcus and I ended up walking down 14 flights of stairs together. He laughed halfway down. "I guess this is today's free workout." I smiled. It definitely wasn't on my schedule. When we finally reached the parking lot, the rain was pouring. Marcus looked at me. "You drove?" I shook my head. "No." "So did I." He laughed again. "Looks like we're both stuck." We stood beneath the building entrance, watching cars splash through flooded streets. Minutes passed. Then Marcus looked toward the small cafe across the road. "Want some coffee while we wait for the rain to calm down?" I hesitated. He quickly added, "As friends." That made me smile. I'd like that. Neither of us knew that simple cup of coffee would change both our lives forever. Over the next year, our friendship slowly became something deeper. Marcus never cared that I dressed simply. He never complained that I preferred quiet restaurants over expensive ones. He once told me, "You make me feel peaceful." Nobody had ever described me that way before. Months later, he proposed. There was no fancy yacht, no television cameras, no orchestra, just Marcus, standing beneath the same cafe awning where we had shared our first coffee, holding a small velvet ring box, smiling nervously. "I don't have everything figured out yet," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to figure life out without you." Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "Yes." It was the happiest day of my life. For the first 2 years of our marriage, life was beautifully ordinary. Marcus continued building his career. I continued pretending to be an office employee. Every evening we cooked dinner together. Every Sunday we attended church. We laughed, we dreamed, we planned for children. Sometimes I wondered whether I should finally tell him the truth about my wealth. Each time, I decided to wait a little longer. Not because I didn't trust him, because I wanted just a little more time loving a man who loved me without knowing what I owned. I thought I had forever. I was wrong. One Friday evening, everything changed. Marcus was driving home from a client meeting. A truck driver ignored a red light. The collision was so violent that witnesses said both vehicles spun across the intersection before crashing into a concrete barrier. When my phone rang, my entire world stopped. The voice on the other end spoke only 6 words. "Your husband has been in an accident." My knees gave way, and before I could even ask another question, the call disconnected. The ride to the hospital was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Every red light felt like an enemy. Every second stretched into an eternity. I kept whispering the same prayer over and over. "Please, God, just let him be alive." When I finally rushed through the emergency room doors, I spotted 2 police officers speaking with a nurse. My heart pounded. "I'm looking for Marcus Bennett," I said, struggling to catch my breath. The nurse looked at her clipboard. "Are you family?" "I'm his wife." She softened immediately. "This way." The walk down that hallway felt endless. Machines beeped from every direction. Doctors hurried past with serious faces. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The nurse stopped outside a room. "The doctors are still examining him. You can wait here." The door wasn't completely closed. I caught a glimpse of Marcus lying on the bed. His head was wrapped in thick white bandages. Bruises covered the side of his face. Tubes and wires surrounded him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The strong, confident man who had always protected me suddenly looked so helpless. A doctor walked out moments later. "Mrs. Bennett?" "Yes, I'm Dr. Harrison." His expression told me this wasn't good news. "Your husband survived a very serious collision." I nodded anxiously. "He suffered multiple injuries, but the one we're most concerned about is the trauma to his optic nerves." I stared at him. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." The doctor sighed quietly. "The accident caused severe damage to both eyes." I felt my stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "It means your husband cannot see." The world around me disappeared. It was as if every sound inside the hospital faded away. "No," I whispered. "There must be another surgery." "There will be surgeries," he answered gently. "But right now, we don't know if his sight can be restored." The words struck harder than anything I'd ever heard. Permanent, temporary, uncertain. Nobody knew. When I was finally allowed inside the room, Marcus was still unconscious. I walked over slowly, sat beside him, held his hand. It was still warm. I leaned closer. "I'm here." Tears rolled down my face. "And I'm not going anywhere." 3 days later, Marcus woke up. The first thing he asked was, "Why is it so dark?" I froze. The doctor stepped forward. "Marcus," he swallowed. "The accident injured your eyes." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've temporarily lost your vision." Silence. Marcus laughed. A nervous laugh. "No." Nobody answered. His breathing became faster. "No." He reached toward his face. "No, no, no." He began pulling at the bandages. Doctors rushed forward. "Marcus!" He struggled wildly. "I can't see!" The panic in his voice broke my heart. "I can't see!" I grabbed his hands. "Marcus." He turned toward my voice. "Ava, I'm here." His breathing slowed slightly. "I can't see you." I squeezed his hand tighter. "I know." His lips trembled. "I'm blind." For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. He cried like a little boy whose entire world had just disappeared, and all I could do was hold him. The months that followed tested our marriage in ways neither of us expected. Marcus couldn't drive anymore. He couldn't work. He couldn't read. Simple things became impossible. Pouring coffee, walking upstairs, buttoning a shirt, crossing the street. Everything required help. And every single day, I was there. Every morning I guided him through our home. Every afternoon I drove him to physical therapy. Every evening I read business reports aloud because he refused to completely abandon his work. Sometimes he'd become frustrated. He'd slam his cane against the floor. "I hate this." Other times, he'd sit quietly near the window, listening to sounds he could no longer place. One evening he asked softly, "What color is the sunset?" My heart shattered. "It's beautiful." He smiled sadly. "I miss beautiful." His friends visited during the first month. By the second month, the visits became less frequent. By the fourth month, most of them had disappeared completely. The same people who once called him every weekend suddenly became too busy to answer his calls. Business partners stopped inviting him to meetings. Clients quietly moved their investments elsewhere. Even some relatives began saying, "Life has to move on." But I never left, not once. Every morning before work, I made his breakfast. After work, I came straight home. Weekends belonged entirely to him. People started asking me questions. Ava, aren't you tired? You're still young. You don't have children. You could start over. I always gave the same answer. I married Marcus, not his eyesight. Nearly a year after the accident, Marcus sank into depression. One afternoon I returned home and found him sitting in complete darkness. The curtains were closed. The television was off. He hadn't touched the lunch I'd prepared. Marcus? He didn't answer. I sat beside him. What happened? His voice was barely above a whisper. I heard two men talking today. I waited. They said my career is over. Silence. They said nobody wants to trust a blind financial consultant. He laughed bitterly. Maybe they're right. No, they are. He stood suddenly. I can't even walk across my own living room without counting my steps. His voice cracked. I'm useless. I walked toward him. You are not useless. Then what am I? I looked into the eyes that could no longer see mine. You are my husband. He shook his head. You deserve better. I smiled sadly. No, I chose you, and I'd choose you all over again. He wrapped his arms around me and cried against my shoulder. At that moment, I made a promise to myself. No matter what it cost, I would find a way to restore his sight, even if I had to sacrifice everything I owned, because love wasn't something you spoke about. Love was something you proved, and I was about to prove mine in a way Marcus could never have imagined. The promise I made that night wasn't an empty one. I meant every word. If there was even the smallest chance that Marcus could see again, I would find it, no matter what it cost. The next morning after helping Marcus get dressed, I kissed him on the forehead before leaving for work. I'll be home early. He smiled faintly. I'll be waiting. As soon as I stepped outside, I didn't drive to Sterling Financial Group. Instead, I drove to one of the most expensive eye hospitals in the state. For nearly 2 hours, I sat with specialists asking questions. What treatments are available? What are the success rates? What if money wasn't the issue? Most of the answers were disappointing, until one doctor said something that made my heart race. There is an experimental procedure. I leaned forward. Will it work? He folded his hands. We've seen promising results. So why isn't everyone doing it? He sighed. It's extremely expensive. How expensive? He slid a document across the table. When I looked at the amount, even I stopped breathing for a second. The surgery alone would cost nearly $500,000. It didn't include rehabilitation, medication, or follow-up treatment. The total would be much higher. The doctor looked at me kindly. I know it's a lot. I nodded slowly. When can it be done? He looked surprised. You mean, if the money is available? Yes. We could begin preparing within 3 months. I thanked him quietly before leaving. The entire drive back, one thought kept running through my mind. Marcus could see again. There was hope, real hope, and I wasn't about to let money stand in the way. That evening, Marcus was sitting on the balcony listening to the rain. I heard the weather report, he said with a small smile. They said it's supposed to rain all week. It probably will. He laughed softly. You know, I miss watching storms. I sat beside him. You'll watch them again. He reached for my hand. I wish I had your faith. I squeezed his fingers. You don't need mine. You'll have your own soon. He smiled, thinking I was only trying to comfort him. He had no idea. I already had a plan. The following Monday, I arrived at Sterling Financial Group before sunrise. Most employees hadn't arrived yet. I walked into the executive elevator instead of the public one. It carried me directly to the top floor. Mrs. Eleanor Grant was already waiting. She smiled. Good morning, Ms. Brooks. Good morning, Eleanor. She handed me a stack of reports. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. I nodded. Let's begin. Inside the boardroom sat 8 directors. Every one of them stood as I entered. Good morning, Ms. Brooks. I greeted them warmly before taking my seat. For the next 2 hours, we discussed acquisitions, market expansion, new investments, and company growth. No one outside that room would ever believe the quiet woman they saw making coffee downstairs was now leading one of the largest financial firms in the country. That was exactly how I preferred it. When the meeting ended, everyone left except Eleanor. She looked at me carefully. You seem distracted. I smiled weakly. I need money. She almost laughed. You own this company. I know, but I don't want to touch company funds. She became serious. Personal. I nodded. My husband. Understanding filled her eyes. The surgery. Yes. She opened another folder. You still have your private investment portfolio. I do. You also own 2 commercial buildings. I know. And your vacation property. I looked down. My parents loved that house. She waited quietly. After a long silence, I finally spoke. Sell it. Eleanor blinked. Are you sure? Immediately. And the lake house? I closed my eyes. Sell that too. She hesitated. You'll lose millions in future appreciation. I don't care. What about your grandfather's antique collection? I looked toward the window. They're just things. She nodded. I'll make the arrangements. Within 6 weeks, everything was sold. The lake house, the vacation home, luxury investments, rare artwork, Even family heirlooms that had been passed down for generations. One by one, they disappeared. I never told Marcus. Whenever he asked why I looked exhausted, I simply smiled. Work has been busy. At home, life became harder. Marcus hated depending on me. One afternoon, he accidentally dropped a bowl in the kitchen. It shattered across the floor. He stood frozen. "I'm sorry," I hurried over. "It's okay." "No," his voice cracked. "It's not." He bent down to help. A piece of broken glass cut his hand. Blood appeared immediately. I grabbed his wrist. "Don't move. I can't even clean up after myself." Tears formed in his sightless eyes. "I've become a burden." I carefully wrapped his hand with a towel. "You've never been a burden. You don't have to lie. I'm not." He lowered his head. "If I could see your face, I'd know whether you're telling the truth." I smiled through the pain. "If you could see my face, you'd know I mean every word." He reached toward where he thought I was standing. His fingertips brushed against my cheek. "I wish I could see you." "So do I." 2 months later, the hospital finally called. The funds had cleared. The surgery had been approved. I sat in my office staring at my phone. For a moment, I couldn't speak. After everything I'd sold, after every sacrifice, it was finally happening. I immediately drove home. Marcus was in the living room listening to an audiobook. "I have news," he smiled. "Good news?" "The best." I knelt beside him. "The hospital called." He became completely still. "They're ready." Silence. "You mean?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "The surgery." His lips trembled. "They found funding?" "Yes." He covered his face with both hands. "I can't believe it." Neither could I. He reached for me and hugged me tightly. "I don't know which investor helped me, but whoever they are, I'll spend the rest of my life thanking them." Tears filled my eyes. I hugged him back. "You already have." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I quickly smiled. "I mean, you'll thank them by living a full life." He smiled. "I promise." As he held me, he never noticed the tears quietly rolling down my face. Because the truth was, there had never been an anonymous investor. There had only been his wife, the woman who had quietly given away almost everything she owned, just so the man she loved could see the sunrise again. The morning of Marcus's surgery arrived faster than either of us expected. Neither of us had slept much the night before. Marcus sat quietly at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped together. For the first time in months, he looked afraid. Not because he was blind, because he was afraid to hope. Hope could be dangerous. If the surgery failed, he didn't know if he had the strength to survive another disappointment. I knelt in front of him and held both of his hands. "You don't have to be afraid." He smiled weakly. "I've never been this nervous. You've survived worse." He laughed softly. "I guess I have." Then his smile faded. "Ava, what if it doesn't work?" I looked into the eyes that had not seen mine in 4 years. "Then we'll keep living." "And if it does?" I smiled. "Then you'll finally see how handsome your wife thinks you are." He laughed for the first time that morning. "You always know how to make me smile." I learned from the best. The hospital was already preparing when we arrived. Doctors walked quickly through the hallways. Nurses checked paperwork. Machines beeped softly from nearby rooms. Everything felt calm. Too calm. Marcus squeezed my hand. "You're still here?" "I'm not going anywhere." "I know." He smiled. "You never do." A nurse approached. "It's time." Marcus slowly stood. Before they wheeled him toward the operating room, he reached for my face. His fingers found my cheeks. "I love you." The words almost broke me. "I love you too. If I wake up and I can see," he smiled, "the first person I want to look at is you." A tear escaped before I could stop it. "I'll be waiting." The operating room doors closed. And just like that, I was alone. Hours passed. 1, 2, 3. I couldn't sit still. I walked the hallway, prayed. Read the same magazine article 5 different times without understanding a single word. Every time the operating room doors opened, my heart jumped. But it was never the doctor. Finally, nearly 6 hours later, his surgical cap was still on. His mask hung around his neck. I stood immediately. "Doctor?" He smiled, a real smile. "The surgery went well." I covered my mouth. "We won't know the final results until the bandages come off. But, so far, everything looks very promising." The tears came instantly. For the first time in years, they were tears of hope. Marcus remained in the hospital for several days. His eyes stayed completely covered. The doctors were careful. No bright lights, no unnecessary movement, no stress. Marcus joked constantly. "I've waited 4 years. I can wait another week." But I knew he was counting every hour. Every morning he asked, "What day is it?" Every evening, "How many more?" I answered patiently, "Almost there." One afternoon, while Marcus rested, Dr. Harrison asked to speak with me privately. We stepped into his office. He closed the door. "I wanted to tell you something." I nodded. "Your husband is very fortunate." "Why?" He folded his hands. "Many families can't afford this procedure." I smiled politely. "I'm grateful." He looked directly at me. I also know you're the one who paid. I froze. We don't usually discuss financial matters, he continued. But I reviewed the records. You made enormous sacrifices. I looked away. It was worth it. He smiled gently. I hope one day he understands what you've done. So do I. But deep inside, I wasn't sure I wanted Marcus to know. Love shouldn't come with a receipt. I hadn't helped him because I wanted praise. I'd helped him because he was my husband. 1 week later, the day finally arrived. The examination room was brighter than usual. Several nurses stood nearby. Dr. Harrison adjusted the light. Marcus sat perfectly still. His breathing was shallow. You ready? Marcus laughed nervously. I've never been more ready. The doctor began removing the bandages. Slowly, carefully, layer after layer. The room became silent. I couldn't even hear my own breathing. Marcus blinked several times. He immediately closed his eyes again. The light, it'll feel bright. The doctor adjusted the room lighting. Take your time. Marcus slowly opened his eyes again. He frowned. Shapes, blurry colors, movement. His vision wasn't perfect, but it was there. Oh, my God. The doctor held up 3 fingers. How many? Marcus stared. 3. The doctor smiled. Excellent. A nurse quietly wiped away tears. I couldn't stop crying. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. I can see. He looked around the room like a little boy discovering the world for the first time. The walls, the ceiling, the flowers, the nurses, everything amazed him. Then, his eyes slowly turned toward my voice. Our eyes met. For the first time in 4 years, time seemed to stop. My heart pounded. This was the moment I'd dreamed about, the moment I'd prayed for, the moment I'd sacrificed everything for. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes searched my face. His expression softened. He smiled. Ava? I smiled through tears. Hi. He reached out and gently touched my cheek. So, that's what you look like. I laughed softly. I guess so. He smiled warmly. You're beautiful. Tears streamed down my face. Not because of the compliment, because after everything we'd been through, we'd made it. Or at least, that's what I believed. I had no way of knowing that success would change Marcus far more than blindness ever had. And the man looking at me with gratitude that morning would soon become someone I barely recognized. The first few weeks after Marcus regained his sight felt like a miracle. Every morning, he stood by the bedroom window, watching the sunrise as though he'd never seen one before. He smiled at children playing outside. He admired the changing colors of the sky. Sometimes he would simply stare at the rain sliding down the windows. I forgot the world was this beautiful, he whispered one morning. I wrapped my arms around him from behind. The world never changed. He smiled. I did. At the time, I thought he meant it in a good way. I couldn't have been more wrong. Within a month, Marcus returned to Sterling Financial Group. The employees welcomed him with applause. His coworkers embraced him. Even clients who had disappeared during his blindness suddenly remembered his phone number. People love a comeback story, especially when the person looks successful again. Marcus walked into the office with confidence. His shoulders were straight. His smile was bright. Everyone celebrated him. Nobody knew the woman quietly walking beside him owned the building. I parked in the employee lot as usual. Marcus looked confused. You know, he said, I think I should start parking in the executive garage. I smiled. Why? He chuckled. I've earned it. I nodded. You probably have. It was a small comment, but it was the first time I'd heard something different in his voice. Pride. A few days later, I noticed another change. Marcus had started paying more attention to appearances. He bought expensive suits, designer watches, Italian shoes. He spent hours choosing ties before work. One evening he stood in front of the bedroom mirror adjusting his jacket. What do you think? You look handsome. He smiled proudly. I always wondered what I actually looked like. You've always been handsome. He laughed. I guess now everybody else gets to know too. Something about that sentence stayed with me. The compliments came quickly. Women at the office suddenly found reasons to visit his department. Receptionists smiled longer than usual. Clients openly flirted with him. Marcus laughed it off at first. Then, he started enjoying the attention. One afternoon I walked into the company cafeteria carrying my lunch. Before Marcus lost his sight, he always saved me a seat. Always. That day, he was sitting with several senior managers. There was an empty chair beside him. I smiled and walked over. Before I could sit down, one of the managers said, "Oh, we're actually discussing executive matters." Marcus didn't say a word. He simply looked at me, then looked away. The silence hurt more than any insult. I smiled politely. No problem. I took my tray and sat alone. From across the room, Mrs. Eleanor Grant watched everything. She frowned but said nothing. That evening she knocked gently on my office door. You've noticed it too. It wasn't a question. I looked up from the financial reports. Noticed what? Marcus. I sighed. He's adjusting. She folded her arms. No, He's changing. I remained silent. She walked closer. You've hidden your identity from him for years. I know. What if he isn't the man you believed he was? I smiled sadly. I still believe he is. Eleanor looked at me with concern. I hope you're right. Unfortunately, she wasn't. The company announced its annual Leadership Excellence Gala. It was the biggest event of the year. Investors, executives, business leaders, media personalities. Everyone important would be there. Marcus was excited. This will be my first major event since the accident. I'm happy for you. He smiled. You'll come with me, right? I laughed. Of course. What are you wearing? I haven't decided yet. You should buy something elegant. I raised an eyebrow. You've never cared what I wore before. He hesitated. Well, this is a formal event. I nodded slowly. I understand. The following Saturday we went shopping together. Marcus walked confidently through one luxury boutique after another. Salespeople greeted him immediately. Good afternoon, sir. Can I show you our newest collection? He enjoyed every minute of it. Then we entered a designer store. I picked up a simple navy blue dress. Marcus frowned. That's what you're choosing? I smiled. I like it. He looked around at the mannequins. What about something more glamorous? I laughed. Since when do I wear glamorous? He shrugged. I just think. He stopped himself. What? Nothing. No. Tell me. He forced a smile. I just want us to look good together. The words sounded harmless, but something about them felt different, as though, for the first time, he cared how people would judge us. The gala arrived. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Live music floated through the air. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Business executives greeted one another with polished smiles. Marcus looked incredible in his black tuxedo. As we entered, people immediately surrounded him. Marcus, it's great to see you. You look amazing. We've missed you. He smiled proudly. I quietly stepped aside, allowing everyone to congratulate him. No one recognized me. They simply assumed I was his wife. An ordinary woman standing beside an extraordinary man, exactly as I had planned years ago. Then, a woman approached. She was tall, elegant, confident. Every head turned as she walked across the ballroom. Her name was Jasmine Carter, a well-known entrepreneur and social media personality. She smiled brightly at Marcus. So, you're the famous Marcus Bennett. Marcus smiled back. And you must be Jasmine. I've heard so much about you. She extended her hand. He shook it. It finally makes sense. Marcus frowned slightly. What does? She laughed. I expected someone handsome. I wasn't disappointed. Marcus laughed. So now you can actually see me. She smiled. I like what I see. I stood only a few feet away. Marcus didn't introduce me. Not immediately. He kept talking, laughing, smiling, almost as if I'd disappeared. Finally, Jasmine looked toward me. And who is this? Marcus hesitated. Just for a second, but I noticed. Then he smiled awkwardly. Oh, this is... He paused again. My wife. Jasmine's smile faded slightly. Oh, nice to meet you. You too. She turned back toward Marcus almost immediately. Continuing their conversation, ignoring me completely. Marcus never noticed. Or maybe, he did, and simply didn't care. As I watched them laugh together beneath the glittering lights, a strange feeling settled deep inside my heart. Not jealousy, not anger, just a quiet fear. Because for the first time since Marcus regained his sight, I felt like the woman he had once promised to love forever was slowly becoming invisible, and I had no idea that before the night was over, that fear would become something far worse. The ballroom buzzed with laughter. Soft jazz floated through the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of guests. Business executives exchanged handshakes. Photographers moved from table to table, capturing smiles that would appear in magazines the following morning. Marcus looked happier than I had seen him in years. For a moment, I told myself I was imagining everything. Maybe he was simply enjoying being able to see again. Maybe I was overthinking. Then Jasmine touched his arm. She leaned in slightly as she laughed at something he had said. Marcus laughed too. It wasn't the laugh that bothered me. It was the way he looked at her. There was admiration in his eyes. The same admiration he used to reserve for me. Only now, I wasn't sure he even noticed I was standing beside him. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sterling Financial Group's annual Leadership Excellence Gala. The audience applauded. We are here tonight to celebrate resilience, excellence, and the remarkable people who have helped shape this company. Marcus squeezed my hand. I never thought I'd make it back here. I smiled. You earned this moment. He nodded. I hope so. As dinner was served, people continued stopping by our table. Every conversation was about Marcus. We prayed for you. Your recovery is a miracle. You look fantastic. You've inspired all of us. Marcus thanked each person graciously. I was happy for him. I truly was. Then one older investor turned toward me. And you must be the amazing wife we've heard so much about. Marcus smiled politely. She's been helpful. Helpful. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Not loving, not supportive, not extraordinary. Helpful. As though I had merely assisted him. I forced a smile. It was nothing. The investor shook his head. No. It was everything. Marcus quickly changed the subject. An hour later, the music became louder. Guests gathered near the dance floor. Jasmine walked over carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed one to Marcus. I've been meaning to ask, how does it feel seeing everyone again? Marcus grinned. It's like getting a second chance at life. I can imagine. She looked around the room. And now that you can actually see, she laughed playfully. I bet you're noticing things you never noticed before. Marcus chuckled. You have no idea. Jasmine smiled knowingly. I'm sure. Something about that exchange made my stomach tighten. Later that evening, a photographer approached. Mr. Bennett, we'd love a few photos. Marcus nodded. Of course. The photographer positioned us together. Perfect. Sir, put your arm around your wife. Marcus did. The photographer frowned. A little closer. Marcus hesitated. Only for a second. But I felt it. The camera flashed several times. Then the photographer smiled. Beautiful. As we stepped away, Marcus quietly straightened his jacket. Almost as though he couldn't wait for the photos to end. Near the end of the evening, the company's chairman invited several employees to share short speeches. Unexpectedly, Marcus's name was called. The room erupted in applause. He walked confidently onto the stage. Looking around the ballroom with grateful eyes, he took a deep breath. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight. Light laughter filled the room. But after everything that's happened, I feel like I should say thank you. Everyone listened carefully. When I lost my sight, I believed my life was over. He paused. I thought my career was finished. My future disappeared. His voice became emotional. But somehow, I found my way back. The audience applauded. I smiled proudly. This was the Marcus I remembered. Then, everything changed. Marcus looked across the ballroom. His eyes stopped on me. He smiled strangely. You know, there's something I've been thinking about ever since I got my vision back. The room grew quiet. I've been honest with myself. I think it's time I'm honest with everyone else. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Marcus, what are you doing? He laughed softly. When you're blind, you imagine people differently. Some guests smiled politely. I used to think voices matched faces. A few people chuckled. Then Marcus looked directly at me. For a long moment, long enough that people began turning toward me too. His smile slowly faded. Then he spoke. So imagine my surprise when I finally saw my wife. The laughter stopped. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting someone like her. Silence. Complete silence. Marcus didn't stop. I know this sounds harsh, but after getting my sight back, I realized something. He laughed awkwardly. I don't think I can spend the rest of my life pretending appearance doesn't matter. A woman near the front table gasped. Someone whispered, did he really just say that? Marcus continued. I deserve someone who matches the life I'm building. My heart pounded. Every eye in the ballroom was on me. I stood perfectly still, unable to believe what I was hearing. Marcus looked directly into my eyes. The truth is, I want a divorce. A collective gasp swept through the room. He wasn't finished. I've spent years being grateful, but gratitude isn't the same as love, and I refuse to spend the rest of my life married to a woman I'm not attracted to. The silence became unbearable. Jasmine stared at Marcus in shock. Even she hadn't expected this. One elderly board member slowly lowered his glass onto the table. Another shook his head in disappointment. Mrs. Eleanor Grant closed her eyes briefly. She couldn't bear to look at me. Marcus stepped down from the stage, walking toward me confidently, as though he expected me to cry, or scream, or beg. Instead, I looked into his eyes. The same eyes I had prayed over every night. The same eyes I had sacrificed everything to save. I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurting, because I finally understood something. The man standing before me was no longer the man I married. Slowly, I removed my wedding ring, placed it gently into his hand, and said quietly enough that only he could hear, I hope your new vision helps you see what truly matters. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? I smiled one last time. You'll understand soon enough. Then I turned around and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, the room remained frozen. No one clapped. No one spoke. No one followed. Because every person in that room knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. They simply didn't know that Marcus Bennett had made the biggest mistake of his entire life, and by Monday morning, his world would begin to fall apart. I think that's the right decision. The ride home from the gala was silent, not because I didn't have anything to say, because there was nothing left to say. Every cruel word Marcus had spoken replayed in my mind. I deserve someone more beautiful. I want a divorce. Gratitude isn't the same as love. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't always arrive with tears. Sometimes, it arrives with peace. The kind of peace that tells you something has ended. When I finally reached our house, I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could. The living room looked exactly as we had left it that morning. His favorite coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. His jacket was hanging behind the dining room chair. The family photograph from our second wedding anniversary rested on the fireplace. I walked over and picked it up. Marcus was smiling in the picture, one arm around my shoulders. Back then, he couldn't see my face, yet somehow, he had looked at me with more love than he did now. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb, then carefully placed it back exactly where it had been. Some memories deserve respect, even when they hurt. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. Marcus walked inside, humming softly. He sounded almost relieved. "Ava?" I didn't answer. He found me sitting in the living room. "There you are." He loosened his tie. "I've been thinking." I looked up calmly. "So have I." He nodded. "I know tonight wasn't easy." "No, it wasn't." He sat across from me. "I didn't plan for everyone to be there." Silence. "But maybe it's better this way." I waited. "We've both been pretending for a long time." "Pretending?" He continued. "I care about you. You've been there for me. I'll always appreciate everything you've done." Those words felt colder than any insult. Appreciate, not love. "I've already spoken to a lawyer." He reached into his briefcase and placed a white envelope on the coffee table. Divorce papers. Already prepared. He had planned this. Before tonight, before the gala, before the humiliation, my heart sank. Not because he wanted to leave, but because I finally realized the speech at the gala had never been an emotional mistake. It had been rehearsed. "I've made sure you'll be comfortable," Marcus continued. "I'll help you find a place. I'll pay your rent for a year. You won't have to worry." I almost smiled. He still thought money could solve everything. He still believed I needed him. I looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "Is there someone else?" Marcus hesitated, then looked away. "I've met someone." The answer didn't surprise me. "The woman from tonight?" He didn't respond. His silence said enough. I stood slowly. "I hope she makes you happy." Marcus frowned. "That's all you're going to say? What else is there? I expected you to fight for us." A sad smile crossed my face. "I've been fighting for us for 4 years. His expression changed slightly. For just a moment, something that looked like guilt flickered across his face. Then it disappeared. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For the first time in years, I made breakfast for one. Marcus had already left. On the dining table sat the divorce papers, unsigned. Beside them, his wedding ring. He hadn't even taken it with him. I stared at it for several seconds, then quietly placed it inside a small wooden box. Not because I hoped he'd come back, but because I respected the vows I had once made, even if he no longer did. By 8 o'clock, I arrived at Sterling Financial Group. The employees greeted me with polite smiles. Just another ordinary Monday, or so they believed. Mrs. Eleanor Grant was already waiting for me outside a private elevator. She looked at my face. "You didn't sleep." "I'll sleep later." She handed me a black leather folder. "The board has been informed." I nodded. "Has everyone confirmed attendance?" "Every director." "The attorneys?" "They're on their way." "The auditors?" "They've arrived." Eleanor studied me carefully. "Are you certain you want to do this?" I looked out through the glass windows toward the city skyline. I gave Marcus every opportunity to choose love over pride. He made his choice. She lowered her voice. "Once this begins, nothing will ever be the same." I closed the folder. "I know." Then I stepped into the private elevator. As the doors slowly closed, downstairs, Marcus walked into the building wearing his best suit, completely unaware that by the end of the morning, his entire life would change forever. Marcus stepped out of his car feeling unusually confident. He adjusted his tie in the reflection of the glass entrance doors before walking into Sterling Financial Group. Normally, the lobby buzzed with laughter every Monday morning. Employees greeted one another. Receptionists smiled. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. Today, something felt different. The smiles were forced. The conversation stopped whenever he walked by. People greeted him politely, but nobody lingered. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." "Morning." A junior analyst opened his mouth as though he wanted to say something. Instead, he simply lowered his head and walked away. Marcus frowned. "What's going on?" He pulled out his phone and sent Ava a text. "Marcus, we need to talk. Last night got out of hand." No reply. He sighed. "She's probably still upset." As Marcus approached the executive floor, his assistant hurried toward him. "Mr. Bennett." "There you are," Marcus said. "I've got a meeting at 9. She looked uncomfortable. "The meeting has been moved." "What?" "Conference room 1. Marcus frowned. "That's the boardroom." "Yes, sir." "Why would I be meeting there?" "I'm not sure." She wasn't telling him everything. Marcus could tell. Meanwhile, the private elevator opened onto the top floor. I stepped out calmly. Mrs. Eleanor Grant walked beside me. Behind us came 2 attorneys carrying black briefcases. "Everything is ready," Eleanor whispered. "Good. The directors have signed in. And the auditors?" "They're waiting." I nodded. "Excellent." Eleanor stopped walking. She looked at me with genuine concern. Last chance. I smiled softly. For what? To stop this. I looked through the large glass windows overlooking the city. The woman Marcus married would have stopped. I turned toward her. But she died the moment he stood in front of hundreds of people and laughed at her. Eleanor didn't argue. She simply nodded. Together, we walked toward the boardroom. Inside, every director was already seated. The atmosphere was unusually serious. No one was chatting. No one was checking their phones. They were waiting. As I entered, every person in the room stood. "Good morning, Ms. Brooks." "Good morning." I greeted each of them before taking my seat at the far end of the long mahogany table. The seat had remained empty for years. Very few people had ever seen me occupy it. Today, that was about to change. 5 minutes later, Marcus walked into the room. He stopped immediately. There were far more people present than he expected. Board members, corporate attorneys, outside auditors, even representatives from the company's largest investors. He smiled awkwardly. "Morning, everyone." Only a few people nodded. His eyes scanned the room. Then he froze. Ava, sitting at the head of the table. He laughed. "Babe, I think you're in somebody else's seat." No one laughed. He looked around. "Seriously, where's the chairman?" The room remained silent. Marcus glanced at Eleanor. She lowered her eyes. Something wasn't right. He looked back at me. "Ava?" I calmly folded my hands on the table. "Please take your seat, Mr. Bennett." He blinked. The formal tone caught him off guard. "What?" "The meeting is about to begin." Marcus laughed nervously. "Okay, but somebody tell me what's going on." Still, no answer. He slowly sat down. One of the attorneys stood. He opened a thick leather folder. "This emergency board meeting has been called under Article 7 of the company's corporate governance agreement." Marcus frowned. "What emergency?" The attorney continued as though he hadn't spoken. "Attendance has been confirmed. The minutes will be recorded. The proceedings will begin immediately." Marcus leaned toward another executive. "Can somebody tell me what this is about?" The executive quietly looked away. Marcus's heartbeat quickened. The attorney looked toward me. "Madam Chair, you may proceed." Marcus looked confused. "Madam Chair?" He followed the attorney's gaze. It ended on me. I stood slowly. The room became completely silent. I looked around the table before speaking. "For years, I have allowed this company to operate without my public involvement." Marcus frowned. "What is she talking about?" I believed leadership wasn't about being seen. It was about making the right decisions. Several directors nodded. Marcus's confusion deepened. Then I continued. "However, there comes a time when silence is mistaken for weakness. And today, my silence ends." Marcus's breathing became heavier. Something inside him whispered that the ground beneath his feet was beginning to crack. He just didn't know why. The attorney reached into his briefcase. He removed a thick blue folder, then another, then another. He placed them directly in front of Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, I suggest you review the documents before this meeting continues." Marcus looked down. The first page read, "Confidential Corporate Ownership Records." His hands froze. Slowly, he opened the file, and the very first name he saw made the color drain from his face. Ava Brooks. His heart stopped. He looked up at me, then back at the document, then at me again. "No," he whispered. "No." The room remained silent, and for the first time since Marcus had regained his sight, he realized there was still one person he had never truly seen. Marcus stared at the documents as if they were written in a language he couldn't understand. His fingers trembled. This has to be a mistake." The company's lead attorney adjusted his glasses. "There is no mistake, Mr. Bennett." Marcus looked up at me. "Ava, what is this?" I remained calm. "It is the truth. No, you work in compliance." "I did. You report to the finance department." "I chose to." He shook his head repeatedly. "Why would you do that?" I answered without emotion. "Because I wanted people to respect me for my character, not my position." The room fell silent again. Marcus looked around desperately. "Someone, anyone, tell me this isn't real." But every face in the room was serious. The attorney opened another folder. "Mr. Bennett, before we continue, there are several matters the board wishes to address." Marcus swallowed hard. "What matters?" "The first concerns yesterday evening." He frowned. "The gala?" "Yes." A large television screen at the front of the room came to life. Security footage from the ballroom appeared. Marcus watched himself standing on stage, confident, smiling. Then came the words. "I want a divorce. I deserve someone who matches the life I'm building. I'm not attracted to my wife." Nobody in the boardroom spoke. The recording continued until Marcus walked off the stage. The attorney switched off the screen. "Mr. Bennett, do you deny making those statements?" Marcus lowered his head. "No." "Do you believe they reflect the values of this company?" He couldn't answer. One of the independent directors finally spoke. "I've worked with Ms. Brooks for 16 years. She has built this company on integrity." He looked directly at Marcus. "You publicly humiliated your own wife. If a man can treat his family that way, how can clients trust him with theirs?" Another director nodded. This isn't about your marriage. It's about judgment, leadership, and character. Marcus felt the room slipping away from him. For years he had dreamed of sitting among these people. Now, every one of them looked disappointed. He turned toward me. You could have stopped this. I could have. Why didn't you? I held his gaze. Did you stop when I stood alone in that ballroom? Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The attorney continued. There is one additional matter. He placed another file before Marcus. This concerns your eye surgery. Marcus frowned. My surgery? He slowly opened the folder. Inside were payment records, hospital invoices, bank transfers, signed authorizations. Every payment had been made from one private account. The account holder's name appeared on every page. Ava Brooks. Marcus stared at it. His lips trembled. No. He turned another page. And another. Each one carried my signature. His breathing became shallow. You paid for all of this? I nodded once. Yes. I thought. The investors. There were no investors. The room was so quiet that the ticking clock on the wall could be heard. Marcus looked completely lost. You sold everything? I answered softly. I sold the lake house, the vacation property, my investment portfolio, my grandmother's jewelry. His eyes widened. You sold your grandmother's jewelry? It was only jewelry. No, it was your family's inheritance. I smiled sadly. You were my family. Marcus covered his face with both hands. For the first time in years, he cried. Not because he had lost his sight, but because he finally understood what it had cost someone else to restore it. The chairman spoke quietly. Mr. Bennett, did you know any of this? Marcus shook his head. No. You never asked? Silence. He had never asked. Not once. He had accepted the miracle without wondering who had paid for it. Later that afternoon, news from the gala had already begun spreading through the business community. Clips of Marcus's speech appeared online. People criticized him across social media. Business bloggers called his remarks cruel. Commentators questioned his judgment. Several clients contacted the company requesting different account managers. The damage was growing by the hour. As Marcus walked out of the boardroom, his phone rang. It was Jasmine. He answered immediately. Jasmine? Before he could finish, she interrupted him. I just heard everything. He closed his eyes. I can explain. Can you? You didn't tell me your wife owned the company. Marcus remained silent. You also didn't tell me she paid for your surgery. You let me believe she was just an ordinary woman. Marcus leaned against the wall. I never knew. Jasmine sighed. I believed you were confident. But confidence doesn't humiliate the person who sacrificed everything for you. It destroys the person who does. His heart sank. Jasmine, I don't think we should see each other anymore. The line went dead. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. Within 24 hours, he had lost the admiration he chased, the woman he thought wanted him, and the respect of everyone he had worked so hard to impress. He stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by polished marble floors and expensive artwork. Yet he had never felt poorer. Back inside the boardroom, I looked out over the city skyline. Eleanor walked up beside me. Do you feel better? I took a long breath. No. Do you regret telling the truth? I looked down at my wedding ring resting in my palm. I regret believing that love alone could change someone. I closed my hand gently, but I don't regret knowing my worth. Outside the boardroom doors, Marcus remained standing, his eyes fixed on the closed entrance. For the first time since regaining his sight, he wished he had been blind. 3 months passed. Spring slowly gave way to summer. Life moved forward, for everyone, including Marcus, but not in the way he had imagined. Every morning, he woke up alone. The house that had once echoed with Ava's laughter now felt painfully quiet. The dining table had only one plate. The living room felt empty. Even the silence seemed louder than before. For the first time in years, no one reminded him to take his medication. No one asked how his day had gone. No one waited for him to come home. He had wanted freedom. Instead, he found loneliness. His career wasn't much better. The board had voted to remove him from every executive leadership committee. He was allowed to remain with the company for a probationary period, but only in a much smaller role. The promotion he had worked years to earn was gone. Several high-profile clients requested new advisors. Many simply refused to work with him. Not because he lacked talent, because trust had been broken. And in business, character was worth more than qualifications. Marcus accepted every decision without arguing. Deep down, he knew he deserved every consequence. One afternoon, he walked past the executive floor. The glass walls overlooked the entire city. Inside the largest office, he saw Ava. She was leading a strategy meeting with investors from 3 different countries. She spoke calmly, confidently. Every person at the table listened carefully. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody underestimated her. When the meeting ended, executives surrounded her with questions. She answered each one with patience and confidence. Marcus watched quietly from the hallway. For the first time, he realized she had never needed him to succeed. She had simply chosen to love him, and he had mistaken her kindness for weakness. Meanwhile, Ava's life had changed in ways she never expected. She had expanded Sterling Financial Group into 2 new states. She launched a financial literacy foundation for young entrepreneurs. She created scholarships for students from low-income families. She funded free eye surgeries for people who couldn't afford treatment. Whenever reporters asked why she cared so much about restoring people's sight, she simply smiled. Because everyone deserves a second chance, she never mentioned Marcus, not once. She refused to build her future around someone else's mistakes. One Saturday afternoon, the company hosted its annual Community Wealth Summit. More than 1,000 people attended: students, small business owners, young professionals, families hoping to learn how to build financial security. Ava was the keynote speaker. As she prepared backstage, an event coordinator approached. "Ms. Brooks? Yes? Our guest speaker has arrived." "Wonderful." She picked up her notes, then stopped. Standing a few feet away was Marcus. He looked different. His expensive suits were gone. He wore a simple navy jacket. There was humility in his eyes that hadn't been there before. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Marcus smiled. "Hello, Ava." She returned the smile politely. "Hello, Marcus. I didn't know this was your event." "I sponsor it every year," he nodded. "That sounds like you." Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just honest. Marcus looked down. "I almost didn't come." "Why?" "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." Ava answered gently. "This event isn't about me. It's about helping people." He nodded slowly. "I understand a stage manager called his name. Mr. Bennett, you're on in 5 minutes." Marcus took a deep breath. Before walking away, he turned back. "May I ask you one question?" Ava nodded. "Go ahead. Why didn't you tell me you owned the company?" She smiled softly. "Because I wanted someone to love Ava, not the CEO." He lowered his eyes. "And I failed." She didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. Marcus walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely. He stood behind the podium for several seconds before speaking. "My name is Marcus Bennett, and several years ago, I lost my eyesight." The room became quiet. "When my vision returned, I believed I could finally see." He paused. "But I was wrong. The truth is, I was still blind." The audience listened carefully. "I judged someone by her appearance. I ignored her sacrifice. I confused beauty with value. And by the time I realized what I had done, it was too late." He looked toward the front row, where Ava sat quietly listening. "The greatest mistake of my life wasn't losing my sight. It was failing to recognize the woman who gave it back to me." The auditorium fell completely silent. Marcus smiled sadly. "If there's one lesson I hope you remember today, it's this. Never wait until you've lost someone to appreciate what they brought into your life." The audience rose to their feet in applause, not because he was perfect, but because he had finally learned humility. After the conference ended, guests slowly began leaving. Marcus found Ava standing outside beneath the warm evening sky. "The speech was good," she said. "Thank you. I meant every word." "I know." He hesitated. "I don't expect another chance." "You shouldn't." He nodded. "I know, but I wanted you to hear one thing." She waited. "I'm sorry. Not because I lost everything, but because I finally understand everything you gave me." Ava looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "I forgive you, Marcus." His eyes filled with tears. "But forgiveness," she continued gently, "doesn't always mean going back." He nodded slowly. "I understand." For the first time, he truly did. They shook hands. Not as husband and wife, but as 2 people whose lives had changed each other forever. Marcus walked away with regret. Ava walked toward her car with peace. Sometimes, the greatest beauty isn't found in a face. It's found in the heart that stays when everyone else leaves. Money can be earned again. Success can be rebuilt. Even eyesight can sometimes be restored. But the love of someone who stood beside you in your darkest hour, once lost, may never return. And that is why true vision has nothing to do with the eyes. It begins in the heart.